John, there are other interests that the other Pythons have. Is one of you a doctor, even as Jonathan Miller?
That's right. Graham Chapman's a doctor.
Yeah.
Terry Jones, who directed The Life of Brian, has just written a book about Chaucer. And all the rest of us mess around with comedy in one form or another.
Can you think afterwards, when you see things you've done in the past, can you remember who thought of what? I know this is a dangerous game to play among writers, but for example, what is it you have in which a network executive says the public are idiots and someone says they're not, and he opens the window and points outside, and there are people stumbling into holes and banging into walls and so on, verifying his... a thing like that, can you ever remember who thought of it or how it came about? Or
It's incredible how difficult it is. Just occasionally you can say, yes, that's very much so-and-so sketch. But then what happened as Python went on is we started to parody each other's styles.
You influence each other.
Yes, because I discovered that Terry Jones and Mike Palin always used to start the thing off in a very imposing and dramatic way with a camera panning across beautiful countryside and dramatic music. And then a drama would start, but just after it got going, somebody would have an argument with somebody about where they put their hammer. You see what I mean?
Yes, that's
and the whole impetus would get lost in this argument.
Yeah.
And so I remember Graham and I writing a thing on a highwayman who held people up and warned them, and then got into a whole prolonged thing about whether he could, how good a shot he was. He could hit that tree. Well, when he says he could hit that tree, he could hit it 7 times out of... Well, take that tree there, he could hit that 9 times out of 10, and let's say it was a windy day, 7 times out of 10. So that he got into this kind of thing, and that was just parodying their style. And our style was Graham and myself had a style apparently that consists of people abusing each other for long periods, and this Mike and Terry started to write. So when you get into late Python, none of us could remember who wrote what.
Is it typical of some one of you to think of a man returning a parrot because of the complaint that the parrot is dead? Hence the famous dead parrot sketch. Is that specifically one person's sense of humor as opposed to anyone else's?
I can tell you exactly how we got to that. Graham and I had written a sketch about a man taking a second-hand car back. And the doors fell off and all that. And we said, this is so corny, second-hand cars, what can we do? And I suggested that it should be a pet shop. And Graham said, how about a dog? He drags the dog in and says it doesn't work, you see. And then I thought, I had a feeling that a parrot's funny because a parrot can talk, And then that was how we got to it. And we wrote that sketch 3 times, and it wasn't until we got the shopkeeper right. My lines were always the same. But Mike Palin, who played the shopkeeper, the sketch never worked until we got Mike's lines right.
Some people would be surprised that you work the things out that much. They might think it's all improvised, or they just go out there and do whatever comes to mind. It's certainly not that.
It's, the improvisation we always feel should take place during the rehearsal period. I mean, that's the time. Why improvise in front of the audience? They've paid money,
There's a lot of verbal humor and a lot of visual humor. I don't know if the verbal comes from some of you and the visual from the other. It doesn't make much difference. But those are 2 very different kinds of humor, and so there's something for everybody. For example, is it in something I just read? Maybe it's a script in the movie where someone confuses the word faithless sects with...
Ah, yes, that was in. Yes, that was in.
False sects, S-E-C-T-S, with forced sex,
that's
S-E-X.
right.
And there's a terrible misunderstanding between the 2 of them.
That's right. Which gets the whole audience interested.
Would be,
Yes, that was the point of it. No, I mean, 2 or 3 of us are very verbal. I'm fairly verbal. Eric is even more verbal than I am. And then we have an American who can hardly speak, who is almost completely visual. If he wants anything, he has to draw a picture of it.
Who's that?
Terry Gilliam.
Oh yeah.
Terry talks.
And he only has 2. He only has 2 phrases, as I've said before. He says,
"Yeah, I really like that,"
which is, "Yes, I really like it."
Oh yeah.
Or he says,
"Oh, it really pisses me off,"
which is, "That really pisses me off." And the entire whole of human life is divided into, the Inquisition, for example, really pisses him off.
Yeah, well, there's something offends everyone, doesn't it? Can't even have an Inquisition without getting some people. It is good to have someone around, though, who does occasionally like something and says it's good, and so you're probably very grateful to him for that.
They don't seem to write in.
Well, why don't we look at a piece of film or tape that you have. Could you set this up for us a bit?
Well, yes. In order to provide for my old age, I accepted an offer from a friend about 5 years ago, 7 years ago, to form a company with him, which we call Video Arts. And these films are intended to train people how to deal with, let's say, how to deal with a complaint, how to run a meeting more efficiently, how to take a decision, all this kind of thing. And we sell them and hire them, believe it or not, to quite serious and proper folk in industry and the civil service. And this one's from a film about secretaries, how a secretary and the boss have got to get their relationship right. And I think this is about the problems if one secretary has not kept her diary corresponding to her boss's diary.
Yeah. Well, roll that and let's see what problem that creates.
It's very, very good.
We'll be the judge.
An appointment, yes, certainly. Can you tell me what it's about? I see. Would 11:30 tomorrow morning be convenient? Good. And are there any particular papers that you'd like him to have with him?
Sorry to keep you, Mr. Turner. Can we make it 2:30? No, not 2:30. How about 3:30?
I've made an appointment for you to see Mr. Sangster of JWN at 11:30 here tomorrow morning. That's all right, isn't it?
Yes, that's okay.
4:15? You can't make 4:15. How about 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock would be fine with me. And with you, but not with me, I'm afraid. Well, it looks like 10:30 on Wednesday. You can? 10:30 Wednesday? Are you sure? No! Oh, mate.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know, he didn't say. Now, 10:30 Wednesday, make a note of it.
Where?
In your appointments diary?
You put it in yours.
But there's no point in having two diaries if they don't tally.
Gosh, you want to know when I'm having my hair tinted? Hello?
What do you do with it?
Oh,
What do you do with
thank you
it?
very much.
I don't know.
What can we learn from that? You've also done, and I'm not going to ask you to describe it, but on a favorite subject of mine, I think you could safely say that almost all meetings are dispensable.
Oh, yes.
And probably the greatest waste of time in any business.
Well, I became intolerable with the Python group because one of our other films called Meetings, Bloody Meetings was exactly about that. And I suddenly realized that there is no point of getting together just because you always have a meeting, you know? And I got very stroppy with the Python group and said, look, I really don't want to come in until I know what we're discussing and why we're discussing it and whether we need a decision. And everybody thought I was being very awkward, and they now actually really rather like it because we do get through meetings in about a third of the time and cancel the ones that we don't need.
You've done a service.
I hope so.
I wonder why it never occurs to, let's say, network executives, either there or here, to hire someone like yourself to run a television network. Once it's been shown that you can command an audience, that you have some sense and some good breeding and so on, all the other things they would require. But nobody like that ever becomes an executive. I don't know why that is. Would you want the job? Would you like to head up the BBC?
No. But the BBC, in fact, often have people going from programs to heading departments. And then they go back to production again afterwards, which is quite interesting. They
Haven't
don't
gone too far.
No, in fact, they get there, they do it for enough, and then they want to go back to production. And I think that there's a club in England called the Cincinnatus Club, after the Roman emperor who stopped being emperor and went back to his farm. And they have a club with a little tie, and they're all the guys who've become executives and then have said, right, that's enough of that, and have gone back to making programs, which is their first love.
I think that probably would happen to me. I know a very funny comedy writer who stands on his constitutional right not to be made a producer, which is supposed to be more desirable in every way.